With some dogs, you start, especially dogs that come in with like behavioral modification issues, a very important skill as the trainer is to be able to pick and choose effectively what are the important things we need to work on in this send home lesson, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So getting back to obedience versus behavior, right? We had a couple dogs go home over the last few days that I sat in on the send home lessons, and I just kind of want to walk through the process of how we chose the things that we ultimately worked on, right? So first dog was this dog Tofu. Tofu came in with really serious separation anxiety issues in general. Obviously, no obedience training, kind of like a snarky Great Pyrenees that just kind of did what he wants to do, no structure, no rules, stuff like that.
Yep.
Owners didn't have him for very long. They had him for 6 weeks prior to bringing him in for training.
Okay.
They realized right off the rip, this dude's behavior is a problem. We got to get this situated, right? And, the first thing that I like to do is when we sit down in a send home lesson is let's figure out and let's hear straight from the owner's mouth what exactly, like if this first week there was like 4 things that if these things were perfect or we got these behaviors under control, my life would be drastically changed with the dog. We try to figure those things out, right? So the biggest one right off the rip, and they even mentioned it like 6 times over the course of the first like 20 minutes of the lesson, right? The first one was that they couldn't even leave the house, right? He was so bad in his crate, right? They couldn't confine him half the time because he wouldn't go in for them. If they left him out, he would destroy things and eat stuff. And not only was that dangerous to him, but obviously you can't have all your stuff getting destroyed constantly. So through looking at that, we could say, okay, well, there's 27 different areas in our day-to-day that by addressing those things, we could gain leverage for the bigger things like this, right? Like that's obviously one way to look at it, and it's not incorrect. Or the other thing is we could just look at this specific issue and make sure we have an immediate game plan for how they could start addressing it, right? So in choosing that, we would take a dog like that and we would say, okay, well, before I work on anything else, before I work on sit down, come, heel, this, that, right? I'm going to focus on making sure this dog can really easily get into the crate. We have a way to hold him accountable for being in the crate. We have a way to keep him calm while in the crate. And we have ways to ensure that he can't get out of the crate once he's in it, right? So let's say the first hour of the send home lesson consists exclusively of working on all of our crate related things. And because we had to spend an hour on that specific thing, we didn't have time to get to his off-leash recall, right?
Yeah.
Or we didn't have time to get into socialization with other dogs. Or we didn't have time to get into nail trims or bed stays or any number of those types of things. The way off and the like risk to reward of what things do we save for later in our follow-up sessions is skewed in our favor, where we're going to be able to go home and they're going to be able to focus on exclusively the things that they need.
Yeah.
Right. And I think as trainers, a lot of times we get a little too hung up on our routines of the things we need to teach. And for a lot of trainers, that winds up being the obedience related tasks, right? They'll focus on, all right, well, whether it's that dog or whether it's a dog that's just really impulsive or whether it's a dog with aggression issues, the first thing the owner needs to learn is basic commands and communication, because it's going to help facilitate them being able to ask the dog to do different things and stuff like that. And they're not wrong, but those things, without showing the owner the application of those specific things into their exact problem behaviors, are useless, right? Because it doesn't matter if they can get that dog to do a perfect downstay or a perfect bed stay or walk beautifully off leash down the street if they still don't know what a proper routine of kenneling the dog up before they leave the house and coming back home is going to be. You know what I mean?
It's not going to help anything,
And sometimes what we'll do is, like, as we're working through the send home lesson, right? And we're working on all those obedience training things, if we're kind of neglecting the things that we're supposed to be doing, is that we'll answer the questions of, they'll be like, okay, well, what do I do when I need to leave the house? How do I crate the dog? And we'll answer it, but it's like almost like an afterthought how we're answering it. This is what I see a lot of times with trainers, right? And that might answer the question in the moment, but when they go to actually put it into practice in a place where they had been previously having a lot of issues, unless they've seen you work through it, they're not going to know what to do.
Yeah.
So that's something we've been putting a lot of time into, and I've really been driving home with our board and trains lately, is customizing that send home lesson to the individual dog that you're working with. Like there's just so many dogs I've worked with that I've sent home over the last year that the send home lessons from one dog to the other could not be more different because it's unique to the situation in which the dog actually needs.